Yes.
As a member of the IEEE Professional Association.
All right, thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate it. My name is Michael Allen. I'm the Outreach Director for the Tech Academy. And today I'm going to do a presentation on how to fail at the tech job search. And obviously the goal is not to fail, but it's often, I'm going to inverse it a little bit because a lot of times we play mental games in our minds that makes it a lot harder for us to search and find a job. There's a lot of things that are involved in looking for a job. And specifically in the tech industry as well, there's a lot of things that we need to do in addition to the job search that can make a big difference in how successful we are. There's no easy road as we move through this process. So I'm going to do a presentation basically and a little bit cover some high-hitting things that can help you avoid it, basically how you get hired. So with that being said, it's going to be kind of an open format. If you have questions as we go through this process, feel free to ask me as we go through. I'm going to try and repeat the question for the audience that's a remote and kind of walk through some heavy-hitting things that are going to make it easier for you folks. So with that, let's get started. All right, make the job search only about you. A lot of times when we start looking for a job, we think we're great, we got all these skill sets, we can go in there and we should get hired right away. We should apply for one job, they're going to say, wow, you're awesome, and then snap you up and then you're going to be validated. It's a lot more complicated than that. When you're searching for a job, it's not about you as a person. It's about you as a, yes?
So make the job search only about you. That is mistake number one.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's mistake number one. So basically, do not make it about you. It is about you determining if you're a good fit for that role, and that company determining if you're a good fit for their culture and that role as well. So as you search for jobs and opportunities, look for those opportunities that are actually that you feel you're going to be competent at, and then apply for them. But at the end of the day, whether you're hired or not, it is not about you. It is about whether you're a good fit. And I'll share a personal analogy. I went through a number of interviews with a company, and one of those companies basically interviewed me for 3 different positions. They called me back multiple times for 3 different positions, and they basically told me, hey, in this first position, you were number 2 in the slot. They didn't tell me at the time when they didn't hire me, but you never know where you are in the pecking order as far as how far you've got. Let me ask you this question. If you were actually interviewing for a job, or you were the hiring manager, and you had 5 excellent candidates, and you could only fill one of them, and you hired that person, does that mean the extra 4 candidates were not worthy of being hired? No, it doesn't. It means that they only have enough for one person. And a lot of times they keep those people in the docket and they'll call them back for other opportunities. So keep in mind that even if you're not hired, it doesn't mean that you were actually not a good candidate. So we have to disengage this idea that if I didn't get hired, it's solely because there's something wrong with me. There could be some opportunities for improvement that kept you from getting hired. There could be things that you need to work on, and we'll discuss some of those things as we go through this presentation. But I want to really disabuse you guys of the idea that your self-worth is not tied to the job search. I mean, you have to disengage that part of it. It's also, again, a best fit for them. They're going to bring somebody on board, and they're going to take a risk with that person. And so they want to find the best candidate that's going to fit that. And not every candidate they hire is going to be 100% perfect for that role. What they're looking for is a cultural fit, a willingness to adapt and grow, a willingness to move forward and take on new challenges. And so if they see that in a person, they're willing to take a risk in that. So, yes, Anne?
Michael, how much does it cost to onboard somebody like in a tech job? So they do the hiring process and then all the paperwork. How much are they putting into
On
it?
average, anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000, depending on the position. Obviously,
Seriously, just to onboard them?
Right, because think about the fact that you have a hiring manager, you've got the employees they're going to bring in to help interview as well for technical portion of it. The HR person that's going to send it out, the paying for the advertising, the time it takes them to actually pull people off the projects. So if you're paying somebody $120 an hour, some of your senior people at that kind of rate, not $120 an hour, a high rate of pay, they're pulling that from their resources of potential earnings. So it's a huge cost factor. Advertising, paying for Monster.com, as well as having the HR person sift through hundreds of applications. Keep in mind, a lot of people apply for jobs and probably only about 20% of that pool that are applying for jobs are going to fit that specific position. But they still have to spend time culling through, which is why very quickly you can go through and they'll say, how can I take this list of 100, 200 applications and make it easy? Oh, the person didn't put a profile picture, gone. Oh, the person didn't give a cover letter, gone. There's a lot of small tidbits that they'll look at, and their goal, think about it, you're an HR person, and your job is you've got 7 different positions to fill, and you've got 1,400 applications to look through in a period of a couple of weeks. Are you going to sit there and look at each resume and really go through the fine-tooth comb and figure it out? Nope. You're just going to toss it. If the person's not willing to put the effort and energy into each of those details, they're going to look for ways to get rid of it. To answer your question, so because it's going to cost them $70,000 and they bring you on board, they do not want to have a scenario where they hire somebody and then 2 or 3 months later they have to let them go, because by then all the candidates they did interview are probably hired if they were good. They were already hired and gone, and so they have to start the whole process over again. And so, quite frankly, who here wants to lose $140,000 in a period of 3 months? Good, we all like our finances. So basically, with that in mind, it's a scenario that they don't want to lose money. So, but that being said, just because they didn't hire you doesn't mean you're not a good coder or developer. Doesn't mean you don't have potential. You've got to find the right fit. So keep that in mind. Also, don't expect the job search to be fast and easy. I've seen both sides of the spectrum. I had a student who I introduced myself to at the beginning of the program, and we never talked for 3 months. She was a remote student and never asked any questions, and then called me up one day and said, hey, I got a job. I'm working at this company in their IT department doing .NET development now. I just got hired. I'm super excited about it. And I asked her some information. Well, tell me a little about it. Well, yeah, I walked in this company I wanted to work for, and they liked me, and da-da-da. We had a really good rapport. I'm making $60K a year. And I'm like, oh, wow, a junior developer that just walked in the door and got hired. It was a company she had researched and one she wanted to work for. That's like winning the lottery. It literally is. To be able to find the right job, the right fit, and have that person be able to find the right company, the company like that person at the same time, is pretty rare. The average person across all industries is going to go through 5 separate companies. 5. 5, can you imagine that? 2 or 3 sets of interviews per company. It's a very exhausting process. And so with that process, you're going to be kind of in a long race. Imagine if I asked you guys, hey, I want you to go on a race, a running race, and I'm not going to tell you how far you're going to go. I'm not going to tell you when you're going to be done or where the finish line's at. I'm just going to point you in a direction and you're going to run. And then you're going to follow these little arrows, little tidbits here and there. How many of you would want to do that? One of you? Just going to run? Oh, you're brave. Personally for me, I'm a marathoner, and I want to know what distance I'm running, because that allows me to set the pace. It allows me to figure out how much energy and how much speed I need to do in order to actually survive that distance. If I'm running a 5K, I'm going to drop it down, to a much faster pace, because I can burn through the glycogen much easier. But if I'm going to run a marathon, I got to slow down and figure out a better pace. That's the same thing for you folks when you're looking for a job in the tech industry. You have to pace yourself. You have to set it up and get it so that, hey, I'm going to be looking for a job. It may take me 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, a couple months, maybe even 6 months, depending on your skill set and how much effort and process you put into it. It's a very, very challenging thing to do. You really have no defined finish line. We have a general idea. I want to get a job and I want to be working, but that finish line might be, down the road. It might be immediately, might not. And so part of it is also what's your pain point. When you're searching, a lot of people will say, well, I'm going to accept the first job I get. And sometimes they do. And the job they're going to say, oh, we'll pay you, $20 an hour, and you'll accept the job and you'll say, oh, I'm going to get my feet in the door. And for some people that works. They don't, the pain of looking for a job is too great. They'd rather actually just accept anything that comes down that way. Some people are willing to wait a little bit longer and look for opportunities that are going to be a best fit for them. And those are oftentimes the better opportunities. I had a student who was interviewing. He was under a lot of stress. He was working full-time at a job and going to the Tech Academy, and definitely wanted to get out of his current job. He didn't want to quit because he had a family to support. And he was interviewing a number of companies, and one of the companies he interviewed with, they liked him. They wanted to bring him on board, but there was too many warning signs for him. And as he and I discussed it, we were talking about that, and I said, well, from what I see, and I'm going to give you some background. It was a company that the guy had no IT team already. He had a set of software that was legacy software that was older stuff that he wanted this junior developer to transfer into Python, and wanted to eventually hire other people to come on board. And he was wanting to pay him a lot of money. But the challenge that this person had was he's a junior developer. There's no other people that would be able to help, explain to the boss, so to speak, what some of the challenges were. And so the boss clearly had no idea what was expected or needed of the position. So it was already a position right away where he was being offered $100,000 to do this job, but it was basically destined to be either A, he had to be a savant and really just build things from scratch, which is possible for some people, but most average persons it would be just a meat grinder. And so he decided not to go for that position, decided to pass it up, and then ended up going and working for another company remotely in Texas and ended up making $90K a year with that company. And even that company was a challenge and working hard, but he at least made the decision based on that. So he chose to continue the race. He chose that this is not the stopping point for me. This is not where I want to be. And there's also people that will run a marathon and finish it up and get the job they want. I had one person in Boston who she was not going to accept the job unless it's a good fit for her. And so she went through multiple interviews and actually ended up working through that process and saying, you know what, I know what I want. And she was in her, she had worked in the industry for 20 years back in the 80s, had quit to raise twins, and had spent literally 15 years out of the industry, and was basically upgrading her skill sets. And so she knew what she wanted, she knew how she was going to go about it, and it took her a while. It took her 6 months to find a job. But when she found that job, it was a good fit for her. It was actually in the industry that she had started a small business in prior to that. It was a good cultural fit, and they were using language, the C# language that she was upgrading her skill sets on. So she's now making $90,000 a year in that job as well, because she was willing to extend that pain a little bit in order to make sure that she had the right fit. Because when you actually go into the job search, you're looking for a fit for both you and the company. You deserve to feel like you enjoy the people that you're interviewing with. You deserve to actually be treated with respect and dignity. You deserve to actually, be able to understand what the role that you're going to be playing in that company. So, yes.
So, if you go to an interview,
right,
and you are not treated with respect,
take the job.
Is that a warning sign?
I would say so. Think about it. I went to an interview for one company, and I looked around and I said, okay, how's everybody else acting around here? Because that's a good indication. If everybody's kind of stressed out, head down, unhappy, it's not a good indication that the company has a positive environment. Sure, it might be a bad day, but when you go into that interview process, you're also interviewing them. It's not a one-way street. You're actually trying to learn about them and figuring out, do I want to come in here every day and work in this environment? And if that environment does not appeal to you, or the people are all surly and unhappy, you should be using it as a warning sign. Now, if they offer you, a large amount of money and the job you feel is good enough and easy enough, sure, take it as a starting point. But it should be something you're very conscientious of. We had a student that came in and talked about, his first job. He walked in there, and the first couple of weeks were okay, and then it just went south. It was like unprofessional. There was a lot of stress, lack of clear guidance. And so he quickly decided I needed an exit strategy, and obviously he didn't quit right away, but he started looking for another job almost immediately. and that's okay. If you get into a position and you're not happy with it, try and avoid quitting if you could survive a little bit longer. But you should be looking for a new opportunity while you're working. It's much easier to find a job while you have a job. Yes, Ann.
Let's say the interview process is not at the company itself or in the HR quarters or something else. Is it proper to ask, hey, can I take a look if you get offered second, third interview? Can I just walk through, or how could you do that so you could actually see the space where you would be working? Possibly.
Most of the time, though, they're going to make that opportunity available to you.
They will.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I had a student who interviewed, or not a student, but a person who came to his interview talking about he interviewed with Amazon. He never worked in that environment, but he went to the Amazon office in this area. So he interviewed in the Amazon office here, and then he's now working in Seattle. So, chances are, if you're interviewing with a company, you're going to be going to one of their offices and have a general idea. If it's a small company, you're going to be going right to their office. They're not going to pay to, meet you at Starbucks. If they are, then you might start asking some questions like, do they have an office? Well, they might. There are some companies that are actually remote now. They actually have remote processes, and so, they literally do. Yes?
Amazon, they actually have a bar raiser.
A what?
Bar raiser. It's a person from outside the team,
Right?
and he usually asks you toughest questions and maybe mean to you or something.
Really?
Yeah. So you interview with a team, and one they have like 4 interviews in a row,
Right?
and one person is a bar raiser. He's not in a team.
Yeah.
So if he treated you not so well, it doesn't mean like the company is not good, because Amazon is not very good company. But if your manager is good, then it's okay. So you shouldn't pay attention to this bar raiser.
Right, and that brings me to another point about the job search is that, as a junior developer, getting into a company, sure, if you get into Facebook or Amazon or Google, that'd be pretty impressive. But you're also going to be, in the deep end of the pool, so to speak, and you better be ready to swim and dive and do all kinds of cool things, ready to go from the ground up. Oftentimes, it's better to find a job that's going to allow you to be mentored and to actually support you. We have a number of students working in our graduates that are actually working in smaller companies that you wouldn't perceive as tech industry. We have several students working at Plaid Electric, at Genesis Financial, one's working at Salesforce, and a couple other that are working in just small mom and pop shops that allows them to have a little more support and guidance as they go through that process. We had a couple students speak in the last few months that were from Zapproved. Again, that company is a smaller homegrown company, and they're actually, they need talent as well. So they've actually set up a process to help mentor and onboard those students. They don't want the people that they're hiring to fail, and so they're going to actually put forth a little effort and time and money. Not every company's going to do that. If you get hired, some of the questions you should be asking at the end of your interview, because they'll usually ask you any questions for us. Some of those questions you should be asking are, what kind of mentorship process do you have, or what's your onboarding for new employees, especially new developers that are coming on board. It's okay if you're hiring or if you're applying for positions that are junior developers, they understand that you're probably going to have a limited amount of experience. And so with that in mind, you want to think about, okay, let's be honest and say, here's my skill sets. Because during the interview process, you're actually negotiating with them. You're basically saying, here's the skill sets and talent I bring to the table. Here's my personality. Here's what I'm going to do. Let me learn a little more about you. And it's also a certain amount of negotiation. So if you're setting the expectation of where you're at, it allows them to understand how they can help and support you and mentor you later on in that process, which is far more important than saying, oh yeah, I can do this, or I can do this, I can, and you kind of fill them full of stuff. So if you are weak in some areas, let them know. Yeah, I got some skill sets here, and I'm really strong here, and here's where I really need to improve. And be honest with your assessments. That will allow them to basically see where you're at and then basically support you. All right. Avoid coding and posting your work to GitHub. This is a good way not to get a job. If you're in the tech industry and you're in the software industry, you have to be a developer, you need to act like a developer to actually get hired as a developer. I can tell you, when I did job placement for a year and a half, I had a number of students that literally after they finished the program stopped coding and they were just doing resumes and stuff. And I was like begging them, please post some code, continue your skill sets. I mean, you're gonna be doing this job day in and day out once you get hired. So if you're not coding and adding stuff, sure you may be coding it, but if you're not adding it to GitHub, there's no way of a prospective employer seeing your work. It's super important that you actually think about, okay, what do I want to do every day? I'm going to be coding every day. I want to be developing and solving problems. So you actually have to start doing that. And as you work through that process, you need to start thinking about what am I doing on a daily basis to keep myself moving forward, keep myself honed in on the skills, and also develop new skills and new processes. For the boot camp here and the students that are here, we spend 15 to 20 weeks teaching you a lot of small and core foundational stuff, but we can't teach you everything. And so in that time that you're searching for the job, you're going to be actually working through and building out your skill sets as you go in addition to that, and basically trying to apply what you learned here. And I would highly recommend, if you're currently in the program, that you're actually doing it above and beyond just the minimum assignments that you've been given. So if you haven't been coding or adding to your GitHub, you should start doing it now and keep doing that. It's never too late to start updating your GitHub. So with that being said, I want to kind of go to my GitHub and kind of walk through some tips on things that you should do to kind of do it. Okay, I'm going to sit down for this part because it's going to be a little harder for me to stand and hover at my desk. Okay, obviously a profile pic. A picture of a dog is better than a picture that the avatar that comes with the account. You should ideally put a picture of yourself. A good professional photo is a way for them to see you and get excited about you. And obviously a smile is a lot nicer than a frown. You don't want your profile pictures to be a mugshot. They're going to say, do I want this person to be around me all the time? And they're going to look at your picture and make an assessment. Yes, you have a question?
I hate to ask. I mean, I didn't think they were supposed to look at pictures. I mean,
Well,
stuff. They can't make decisions that, oh, hey,
you're absolutely
wearing a tie. We ain't hiring that guy. I mean, I'm just.
well. You're absolutely right. But the reality is, they're going to find something anyways.
Okay.
They're going to look at you, and part of it is, do you want to be inviting and warm? So they're going to find a picture of you some way.
Okay.
I mean, the internet is quite
Better to have
wild.
this picture than those other-
What's that?
Better to have that picture than those other ones.
Yeah, the one of you drinking or lighting up a pipe or something like that. You want to I avoid that. You want to think about how do you want to be represented, and it's okay for them to go look at your GitHub. They want to look at your work, and why not put a good presentation on there? When they're looking at it, they're saying, is this something I want to have around me? And that is a natural human aspect. We want to know who we're going to bring into our inner fold, because they're going to be working with you. And a smiling photo, regardless of who you are, whether you're old or young or of a different background, a smiling photo says, I'm warm and inviting, and I'm here for you. So, put the best picture forward of you, and if you're gonna, it's almost better to put a picture of a dog if you're gonna frown, or if you're not gonna smile, I almost put a picture of a dog, a happy dog. But the reality is that, it just allows them to see you. I mean, you don't have to. I'm not saying every piece of advice I give is a collection of things that you can do. If you are concerned about that, if you're worried about age discrimination or other types of discrimination, don't put a photo. But there's going to be a way for them to find out anyways. So I would take it from a perspective of I want to put my best foot forward and say, this is me, I'm presentable, I'm professional, here's how I can add value to your company. And quite frankly, most of them are going to go straight to your portfolio and say, can this person code? Because we're desperate, we need somebody. We are in a technological boom. They're not going to hire just anybody, and a good way to present yourself is to make sure your GitHub demonstrates the skill sets and features that you have. So with that being said, let me kind of go over some highlights real quickly. Number one, a little bit of a bio. Take some time and energy into yourself. A little short bio about yourself. What makes you special? What value are you bringing to the table? What excites you about coding? You only have a few lines to do it, but take an opportunity to just do a quick, short, brief, here's me. I love finding solutions to problems. And then I like running as well. And then also put your area and a link to your LinkedIn. You know, make sure that they can get access to more information about you. Make it easy. By the way, when they come into your GitHub and they see this is all blank, if they don't see a coding on a regular basis, what are they going to think? If you saw no green boxes, would you hire that person? Raise your hand if you would hire that person if you saw no green boxes. Would you even bring him for an interview? Nope. Because how are you going to know? I mean, if you spent 2 years in a graphic design school, built out a beautiful portfolio, left it at home when you went to the interview, they're not going to have any way to assess the depth and breadth of your skill sets. Now, I'll be in a moment. So with that in mind, you want to be active and engaged. Now, obviously, don't just post anything on there. You should post things that you're working on. You have a question?
I was just gonna say, would it look bad if like you had tons of green blocks over here and then like tons over here with a huge gap?
Depends on to answer your question, yes and no. I mean, if the gap is only a few months, not a big deal. They might realize if you were actually working somewhere, not a big deal.
Just keep the right side full.
Yes, yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. Yeah, keep your right side. That's much more active. And it takes effort and time to upload code. It takes effort and time to do it. But that's why if you actually act as a developer and you are a developer on a daily basis, then this is going to be just filled up naturally over time. And so don't let the GitHub intimidate you. If you're not comfortable with it, you should get into it and practice and play with it. Build a fake repository and then test the cloning and the pushing and the pulling and the merging and everything else. Get a couple of friends or fellow students to actually practice on a repository and get the idea. Because once you have that verse, guess what? When you get hired in the tech industry, you're going to be using version control. And if you're lucky, you get to use GitHub. If you're not, you'll be some archaic version that you got to take a hammer to every once in a while and figure out how to get it to work. And there are versions out there. I have a good friend who's in software development, and he's like, I wish I had GitHub, because they're using a proprietary old system that's for lack of a better word, decrepit. It works, it's functional, and they've used it for so long that they just don't want to change because you have all your versions in there and all your history and everything else. So, like I said, if you're lucky, you get GitHub. If you're not, then you'll have to learn something new and expand and grow.
So
yes,
maybe that's another warning sign of a company. If they're using all old technology.
Not necessarily. Some companies like banking industries actually are using COBOL, and they're still stuck in that because that's what they've used for a long time. They may need to convert. What's that?
Well, AS400 is usually a good sign that you have a problem. If they're still using AS400 technology.
Oh, from IBM?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of banking that still does that.
Well, I know my old insurance company. They still use AS400s. In fact, my old insurance company, they had the old technology, and then they had the internet built on top of, or the web versions built on top of it. So basically, you'd go in, you'd do your transactions, and then it would then process it down to the old system, and then there was a subsystem below that it went into, and so they looked at it as like, oh, for us to convert, it'll cost us $500 million to convert over. We'll stick with the old system. So sometimes it's not. Here's the thing that's also cool. If you have a company that's old technologies, you are bringing fresh talent to fresh ideas to that company, and then you might be able to offer some newer solutions. We had a student hired here about 2 or 3 years ago, and they were only using certain programming languages, and he knew Python, and he said, hey, I have a solution for this, and we can use Python to do it. And they said, build up a proposal, let's work on it, and they ended up implementing a new solution using Python. So he was able to add value to the company with some of the newer technologies. So sometimes when you go into work for an old shop, it's a breeding ground for you to shine, and because they're trying to bring in talent to solve some of that. One of the reasons why they bring talent from the outside is that talent's been educated and has newer best practices. So don't look at all opportunities, even if they have older technologies. If you're willing to learn COBOL or you want to learn, God forbid, Fortran, you might actually have more opportunities. Because guess what? A lot of people. What's that? What'd you say?
Haskell.
Yeah, Haskell as well. Yeah. But a lot of people are retiring, and they need that talent to help either transition from the legacy software to something new and better, or somebody to help maintain that. And so your marketability goes up with your willingness to learn new skill sets. A couple more things about GitHub before I move on to the other parts of the presentation. Your portfolio should be fairly well laid out. And I say portfolio loosely. I mean, if you're going to be a web designer and you like to design stuff, you really should have a web page portfolio. In my case, I like backend a little bit more, so I'm more interested in doing a quick GitHub portfolio. Just a quick little note of kind of like, hey, here's a little introduction to myself. I've got a link to my LinkedIn again. I'm making it easy for them to find more about me. Link to Team Treehouse, where I did some learning there as well. I've got my Python. I did a FizzBuzz presentation, or a FizzBuzz project with Python. I did a running pace calculator, and then some other things I've done in my coding as well as some hackathons. Anybody here done some hackathons? Anybody know what a hackathon is? All right, good. One person. Hackathons where you can go out and do some challenges using coding. I'd recommend if you have a chance to go to a hackathon, go to a hackathon, because you don't have to be a great coder to enjoy it and be a team member. They'll use your level of skill set. I would recommend, though, that you definitely get versed in version control on GitHub in order to be more valuable on the team. So a quick note before I move on, running pace calculator. I did a Python script for a running pace calculator. I talked about my objective, build a text-based game, or maybe a text-based running pace calculator. Talked about what I was trying to do. So basically the objective. So if you have an assignment, talk about what your assignment was to do. If you create something, tell them why you wanted to do it. Hey, I'm going to create an objective. I want to do a running pace calculator. And then talk about just a high overview of the steps taken and what you've done. And then a link to the running pace calculator or whatever code you've done. Make it easy for them. And then the results. And a lot of times the results is you got it to work and what did you learn from that experience. You can also take screenshots and add it to a README file. Those screenshots could be of your program in action. So a lot of times if you're building something complex, like here and we do the C#, you can get some permission to do some screenshots of the actual finished product and then add those screenshots in. Obviously, if you're working for a company or you're doing something proprietary, ask permission first before you post anything that's proprietary. It's always better to ask and not ask for forgiveness later, because it may cause problems for yourself. So definitely do that. And also, make sure you have a link that goes back to your portfolio so they can then see and make it easier for them to do it. Any questions on GitHub before I move on? Yes?
So comment, the layout you had, the objective
Yep.
you did, and the result.
Yep.
It's been my experience that kind of structure, that structure of ideas,
Right.
is very useful to companies, and in interviews they will ask questions in that form.
Yep.
So having that already done puts it in your head.
Yep.
Which means it's easier for you to explain it to a company.
Right, and the other thing to think about code is that anybody can take a piece of code and download it from the internet and post it to their GitHub, and they could easily do that. And what this does is it basically says, here's my code, and let me talk about my code, what my objective was, how I went about solving it, some pain points, some things I learned about it, the approach I took, and then the actual result, and then some things that I actually built. If you can actually articulate about the code, chances are you're not going to be lazy and download code and just write about it. If you already know about it, you just go build it yourself. So writing about it gives them an opportunity to know that, yeah, chances are if you can articulate about the code, it shows that you actually built it yourself. But it also shows that you can actually talk about code, because quite frankly, a lot of times you're going to be in a meeting with a staff meeting and have to explain what your code is doing. And so it's getting into the habit of talking about and writing about your code is going to be really important. Documentation and being able to articulate critical concepts about what you're trying to do. And this is why practice makes perfect. The more you do it, the better off you're going to be. I will say this, you do not need to do a README file for every single piece of code you write. So for example, I did not do a README file for FizzBuzz, because to me, FizzBuzz is self-explanatory. It's a simple little program. If they don't know about FizzBuzz, I'm not going to reiterate it, because chances are if they're interviewing me, they should know about FizzBuzz. And so I don't need to kind of talk about that code. But if you're doing something unique or something that you did with a project, you should talk about it and build it. And also other pieces of code that you're just dabbling in, just upload it, and then choose specific, maybe 3 or 4 per language that you want to say, these are the codes that I'm proud of, and here's a README file for each one. Again, again, you don't have to do it for every single one, and it takes time to do that. So because of that, you want to be very diligent and do only the ones you're proud of, and talk about those, because you don't have a lot of time in the world to do, write a novel about that. You have a question?
Yeah, so for the repositories, should it be like per program you write, like per assignment if you're going to school, or would it be like per class? Like, okay, this is like Java, and these are all my programs from that class.
That's a great question. I'd recommend it by project, because generally it's a collection of projects that you're working together on. So you might be building a website that's going to have a database, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and so just grab all those into one project. Makes it a little easier. For companies, their main product will probably have one massive repository based on each product.
What if I already have them by class? Like I just uploaded them all. Should I break them all out?
No, I just link to the specific section where you have them.
Okay.
You don't reinvent the wheel. When I built my portfolio, all I did was create a README file as a separate repository, and I just point to the other repositories that I need. You don't have to go and reorganize everything. If you're going to dabble in something, or you for example, you want to upload something very specifically, you could create a subfolders based on that if you're going to do it from the start. But if you've already built it, don't waste your time.
Well, I just upload, but now I'm starting classes next week. I will start to, I'll constantly be contributing to it like individually. So I'll try to do that from now on.
Yeah, you can also link. You can also, if you're going to be on a team project, you can link to that team project as well. I actually link to my team. We all share LinkedIn, and actually, I think Team Tiger actually built out a README file that talked about. Oh, that's the wrong one.
How do you get on a team? Is that like with your employer?
Oh, what's that?
It's from Hackathon.
Yeah, it's from Hackathon. So we just share. One person just shared a repository, and we all linked in, and we all forked it.
One person established a repository.
Yeah.
And then everyone contributes.
Yep.
For-
And then I wrote about my project. What was the objective? This is our team. I actually linked to all my team members on LinkedIn, team strategy, and then results. So you can talk about that. I'm going to move on because we got to keep this moving for, it's supposed to be an hour presentation. All right. So obviously post to GitHub. You've got to be a coder. You've got to develop, and you got to be excited and passionate about it. If you're not coding on a daily basis, you're not going to go very far. Don't use LinkedIn. Keep it blank. Don't ever update your stuff. Even if you have college experience only, post your college experience. Post anything you've done with, clubs, your interests. If you've worked on projects and worked with team members, make sure you do some recommendations. If you have a working history, writing a recommendation for a coworker is a great way to show that you think about others, that you actually have value, and you can actually share value. But also, it also increases the chance that somebody will write a recommendation about you. So if you have any interests on mine, I actually have recommendations as well. So on LinkedIn, obviously I have a profile picture, your standard title and everything else in there, but also list your experiences out. And by the way, if you worked for a company, you got promoted within that company, list each of those positions within that company separately. So I worked for, obviously, Farmers Insurance, and so I listed out each of my positions within that company separately, because it shows that within a company, you were able to promote. It's also pretty hard to take all the responsibilities and what you did in each position and cram it into one slot. So if you have had promotions, post them. Also, as I mentioned about the recommendations, go back to that down below. So here's some recommendations people wrote about me. And so they talked about their experience with me, and they posted it out. And then I also wrote recommendations as well. So I've given 12 already. Geez, wow. So I've given 12. And then you can read it. And the best way to think about recommendations is a 4-part process. Talk about what they're why you're recommending them, and then go for the sharing a story. What about them is why you're recommending it? And by the way, you shouldn't just give a recommendation willy-nilly. It should be something that you actually can say, yes, here's why I'm recommending somebody. Let me share a story. Here's a challenge they took care of. Here's the context behind that challenge. Here is the actions they took to solve the problem, and here was the result and why it was impacted. And then at the very end, I say, if you'd like to contact me via LinkedIn, I'd be happy to discuss further on why I recommend, Dylan Dykes to return to your team. And so I make give an opportunity that not only am I willing to recommend this person, but I'm willing to go into detail and talk to them about that. So when you write a recommendation, feel free to look at my templates or use mine as a template, the starting point. I think it's really important. If you're willing to think outside the box and recommend to other people, number one, you show them how it can be done. And number two, it shows that you're not self-absorbed. You're not like just me, myself, and I. You have to give some in order to get some. And by the way, just because you get a recommendation doesn't mean that someone has to give you a recommendation. Man, again, it has to be somebody that, ideally when you ask for a recommendation, you ask for somebody that actually felt that you had a good rapport with and they were appreciative of you during your work cycle. And they said, hey, yeah, I really like working with you. I'd be happy to write a recommendation. And then kind of ask for those that obviously if you have a bad boss or a boss that you didn't like, don't ask for a recommendation. It might not be the best way to get a recommendation going. But it's something that's important. And by the way, if you're in college and you've never had a job yet, talk to some of your professors. That might be another avenue for you to work with. Or if you're young enough, high school teachers as well. So, yes, Anne?
Say you're coming into coding, into computers from a different field, and you have all these recommendations and all these people and things from a different field and going into computers. What's the best way to do your LinkedIn? What can you do? Because they have a lot of skills that don't necessarily...
First of all, it won't matter. Number one,
okay.
I've been contacted by tech companies because of my LinkedIn recommendations from my prior careers. Okay. We're all human. We all have soft skills or lack of soft skills, and if you have good soft skills and you've got good recommendations, that's what they're looking for. The recommendation is are you as a person going to be a good fit on this team? Because whether you're solving a problem for insurance or you're solving a problem for coding, the soft skills are the common denominator. Your ability to accept feedback, your ability to act on that feedback, your ability to handle ambiguity and deal with tough situations are the same whether you're working in a restaurant, in a tech industry, or in healthcare. It's all the same. So your recommendations, you shouldn't worry. You should be post and proud. If you were prior working in an industry that's not even related, go ahead and keep them. They're going to be a good asset because they should be talking about your soft skills and your ability to handle challenges and problems and why they're recommending you. Again, feel free to look at my recommendations as kind of a starting point of how you might write them. They take time to write, by the way. They're not something that, when I write mine, it takes me about an hour and a half to write a recommendation, which is why I don't just willy-nilly do them. Recommendations take time, and I have to have some tangible story I can share. And I have to kind of think about, okay, well, I worked with this person 10 years ago. What was something I can think about? And then I write that recommendation based on an actual experience that I have with that person that I can share. Again, that's why you don't write them willy-nilly. You write them based on your experience. And if you can't recommend somebody, you just politely decline. I'm sorry, I can't think of something. Yeah, obviously, it's going to be kind of hard to do that, but you have to be honest with yourself. All right, any other questions on LinkedIn? Okay, moving on. Okay, send out only a couple resumes a week. So this is a tough one. On average, every 10 resumes that you send out, you'll yield 1 response, which unfortunately, nobody likes to hear this, but it is a numbers game to a certain extent. It's a holistic approach, but you have to make yourself known to prospective employers. And after 1 week, there might be new job opportunities and other ones that have fallen off. So you need to keep a consistent process going. I would only spend 15 minutes per job application. With a numbers game like that, you don't want to spend an hour and a half per company trying to research it and figure it out. And if all they're going to do is toss your resume. I generally, when I was doing job placement, I told the students 15 minutes or less. Now, obviously, there's some companies where you got to fill out a horrible system. In those cases, yeah, you go a little longer. But when you can have your resume ready to go, have your and if you get into the process, you can get fairly good at copy and paste fairly quickly because you should already have most of these stuff built out. And if you end up doing a lot of resumes, you're going to see a lot of repeating themes. So I do appreciate the fact that there are some companies that make you do it in their process and you have to do all this extra filling out. But, I would limit it to 15 minutes. With that being said, you should write a cover letter. A cover letter is an opportunity for you to introduce yourself. And again, you don't want to write a novel. It's not War and Peace. It's going to be short and sweet and enough for them to say you're excited. It's an introduction. Hey, my name is Michael. I'm applying for XYZ position. Then the next paragraph is going to be talking about why you like them. Because it's like a conversation. If I introduce myself to you and all I do is talk about myself and I never give you a chance to talk, you would think, well, what a jerk. Same thing with a cover letter. It's an opportunity for you to first, number one, talk about what you're applying for, who you are, introduce yourself, what you're applying for. The second paragraph is why you like that company. And so that's why I say spend a few minutes researching the company. There should be something like the company that pops out that you like. So you go to their webpage, you say, okay, what do I like their product? Do I like their mission statement? Something simple that you like, and say, I really appreciate the fact that you guys are, really engaged in the community. I know about this part of your company, da-da-da. Talk about what about the company excites you. Is it their product? Is it their culture? Is it their reputation? Spend just a few minutes researching the website. What sincerely pops out to you that excites you about that company? And if nothing about that company excites you, should you be applying for that job? Because you're going to be saying, hey, I work for this company. And if you can't get excited about that opportunity, I'm not sure I want to apply for it. Most companies have something cool about them that I like, that you can talk about. So again, short and sweet. So the second paragraph is why you like them. The third paragraph, you can actually have a kind of template. What value do you bring to the table? And you could list a couple of skill sets, but really it's about what are your top 3 strengths that you share with them. Are you a quick learner? Do you collaborate well? Are you detail oriented? What are the top things that make you a valuable candidate? Talk about those things in that process, and that'll make it easier for them to say, oh yeah, this is cool. And then the final part of the paragraph is, I'd love to work for your company. I've attached my resume. Please give me a call. So you can get it down to a template format, and obviously if it's a company that you really want to work for, you can spend a little more time on. But again, if I spend an hour per application, and I'm supposed to, if I do 10, that's 10 hours of my life gone. And if I only get 1 response, that means that's 9 hours of my life gone. Whereas if I really hone down on the skill set of just applying for jobs and get it down to 15 minutes, then I've only lost 2.5 hours. And actually, no, I've lost if I get 1 response, I've lost 2 hours and 15 minutes. So keep that in mind. The amount of effort you put into it, you have to get streamlined a little bit. Because yes, it will be painful if you spend an hour and a half on every application. Yes?
So by sending out multiple resumes, do you advise people to keep track of where they
Yes.
sent resumes in the past?
Yes, I literally have a Excel document. If you want a copy of it, I'll send you an Excel document that actually lists it out.
But it's your email history.
Is that?
It's in your email history.
Is it what?
In the mail history.
In the mail system?
History.
It's in
In
your
her
email history.
email
Oh,
history, she
so
sends out these
so
Oh, yeah. It is in your email history, but oftentimes it's nicer to have a document that you can track where you applied, especially if you start getting to like 50 or 60 different jobs. Because then you might apply for a company, and then like 2 months later they call you like, hey, we're really interested in an interview. You're like, well, which company is this? Oh yeah. And you can go back and look at your notes. And so at the end of the presentation, I'll show you my document.
So I'm also thinking there's a risk that going week after week after week, you could find the same job offer,
Right.
maybe through a different search engine. And if you try to keep all of this in your head,
Yeah, you're not going
you
to.
could apply for the same job
It's okay.
more than once.
Yeah.
And usually they also forgot.
Yeah. They'll say, wow, he's really motivated. He really wants to work here. He's applied twice. You should keep track. You should keep track of it in some sort of process. This is again. This is one of many things you need to be doing with your LinkedIn, your GitHub, your resumes. You can't look at this as saying, I must focus only on this one thing. I had a student that literally just sent out tons of resumes but never did his GitHub. And he's wondering, why is somebody calling me? Like, well, because you're not coding. And how would they know what you're going to be doing? And he had never really built out his GitHub. And so they get his resume, look at his GitHub and go, nope, not going. I got to bring this person in. So, again, there's a certain amount of diminishing returns. But I would recommend only spending a few hours on your job search each morning. Try and get your process down, and get the unpleasant task, the morning run, so to speak, out of the way. Get it done, and then spend the rest of the day coding. Literally, get 2-3 hours into your job search, and then stop, and then go and practice your skill sets. Get that unpleasant task out of the way first. Because if you do the other way, we can always keep coding throughout the whole day, right? You can find excuses, but you have to start your day fresh and while you're still cognitive, and you know, hopefully get some coffee first if you need it. But basically, do that part first.
Michael.
Yes.
What are you saying is a target for number of resumes you should be getting out every day?
You know, I really hesitate. You know, my company has recommended 10 a day. I think that, you know, I think if you're just consistently putting out 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, maybe one day you get 10, but one day you get 2 or 3. As long as you're consistently doing at least on average 5 a day, then you start getting a higher opportunity of people calling you back, you know, and getting, the goal is to get an interview. Once you have an interview, you're now moving into the next stage, and you're already halfway there. Because generally they're only going to bring in 4 or 5 people for an interview, maybe 2 or 3 at most. And so you're one of 3 or 4 candidates. So, but if you don't put out a resume, they don't even know you exist. So if you're not putting out and it's like buying a house. For those of you that buy a house, you go look for a house, and the next week, you know, 2 houses are gone and 3 are on the market, and so you have new houses to go look at. And so it's constantly changing. So if you just apply for 50 jobs in 1 week, and then you're like, oh, I'm done, and you're gonna wait for it's kind of, you throw your line out there, you wait for a fish to bite. You know, you have to keep throwing the line out there to keep fishing for new opportunities. I think if you're consistent, it's a better approach than I have to get a set number. If you're consistently applying, but keep in mind, if you apply for 10 jobs in 1 week, that means you're gonna get 1 call. And so in 5 weeks, you got 50 applications, you might get 5 calls. But if you're doing more at 30 or 40 a week, you're going to have a much better chance of getting those opportunities. So, as well as following up. If you apply for a job, you should be following up and say, hey, I just want to touch base. I applied for a position. Let's just see if there's any word on it. Sometimes you can't find the company contact information. Sometimes you can. But following up has a big difference.
I'm not even seeing that many. I mean, there are definitely developer jobs out there.
Yeah.
But I'm not seeing, you know, that many, you know, 50 new junior developer jobs, you know, a week coming in.
Yeah, I'd apply for a mid-level too. The question that you should be asking is, can I do the job? A lot of times companies will say, I want a mid-level developer, but I want you to have, or I want a junior developer and I want to have 5 years of experience. The junior, mid, and senior are arbitrary kind of guideposts. They're kind of, you know, okay, well, you're generally new, you've been around a while, and you should know a lot of stuff. And so I've seen companies ask for junior developers and they want 5 years of experience. I'm like, you're asking for a mid at that point. And so you have to be very conscientious. What's the worst that's going to happen if you apply for a job?
No,
They don't call you. I had a student, Sylvia, who went through 5 separate companies. On her 5th company, she was going to apply. She's like, oh, they want a computer science degree, and I don't have one. Should I apply for it? So I said, Sylvia, what's the worst that's going to happen? And she applied for it, got the job, and is now working there after a year and a half. You know, and they bought her contract out because she went to the recruiter. So I would argue that your question is, can you do the job? Or are you willing to bust your butt to do the job? Because sometimes they'll ask for like a wish list of like, okay, you need to have Java, you need to have or C# and HTML and CSS. You must walk on water, you know, bring coffee or whatever to the boss. There could be a wide list of things that they want you to do, and you may not be able to do all of them. But if you can apply for it, and they may say, you know what, based on your GitHub, we can see that you're talented. We've also had students who go and apply for jobs that are way beyond them, and they say, we really like you, and would you be interested in this other position that's a little lower? And oftentimes they say yes, and they get their foot in the door, and they get promoted up from there. So we've had a number of students where that's actually happened, where they've actually applied for positions that are higher level. They've interviewed, they were kind of interested in that person for a number of reasons, i.e. GitHub or something like that, and said, okay, let's try this person out. Yes?
So, how do you find opportunities? Do you just pick companies and send them applications?
Both. I would say
Or-
networking. Networking is a big factor. I mean, the fact that you're coming to this meetup, how many of you have shared a LinkedIn today? Raise your hand if you shared a LinkedIn.
Shared?
Shared a link, you gave your LinkedIn to somebody. You guys should be linking up with each other. You know, if you have not, you should meet somebody new today and share a LinkedIn. The network is huge. You go to a meetup and you're going to be at a meetup and you're going to be talking to somebody and you're not going to know that they're a hiring manager and they're going to be, oh, this person's interesting, and you can link up with them. Or it might be an employee that you link up with at a company, and the manager is linked up with that employee, and they see you in the profile and they ask that employee, hey, we need a junior developer. Do you know this person? I see they came up on my profile on LinkedIn. And they say, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. You know, John was really nice. Could be an opportunity there. 80% of the jobs that are out there are through some form of networking. You have a question? Yes.
Is it weird to apply for a job where there is no opening with
There's no what?
they don't yet have an opening that they're showing? Like you would like a company?
No, not at all. Go for it. You know, show some initiative. I would just.
You want to work there? Do you make up a job?
No, I wouldn't make up a job. I'd say, hey, Facebook, I really like you guys. Here's where I'm currently at, and I love the opportunity, and just submit it on. Try and make sure it gets the right spot. You might even, if it's a small company, I would walk right in and give them the resume and say, hey, I know you guys are a real small startup firm, and I love the fact that you guys are working on this product, and then you just hand them a resume. That's another way to just show your interest. How many people actually would do that? How many people have the guts to go in and introduce themselves and say that? Yes, Carrie, I know you would. And Steve. And again, you're making yourself known to them. They have to pay money to try and push it out there and find people to come in. And if you're going out there, they may not have a position right away, but they say, oh, okay, cool. And so the hiring manager looks at it, and if they have an opportunity, they might keep you in the hopper. You'd also want to make sure that if you really want to work for that company, keep an eye out for positions that are opening up, and then apply for them as they do come open. But no, I think it's a great idea, and it's a lot easier to do that. I shouldn't say not a lot easier. It's a lot easier to apply online and never go in person, but it takes a lot of courage to go in person and say, hey, I'm really excited about your company. Here's my resume. If you ever have an opening, I'm going to keep my eye out for opportunities as well. Yeah, I recommend it. So the other thing, too, is a balanced approach. Focusing on one aspect of the job search. It's very, it's very easy to say, I want an easy solution to find a job. And a lot of times people will say, oh, I'm going to spend all my time on the resume or all my time on I got to learn all the tech skills and this skill sets. And so they spend all their time coding, but they don't do all the other things. You have to find a balanced approach to going on each of the different things. You can spend an hour on each of your LinkedIn, your GitHub, and your other thing. Obviously, you need to code on a regular basis, but you have to be a balance in your approach. You have to say, okay, I want to do this, so I need to act like a developer, but I also need to start the actual process and do all the small things. How many here actually have done whiteboarding and gone to the technical interview practice or any kind of practice at all? You have to be willing to put yourself in uncomfortable positions, because quite frankly, once you get into that interview, it's going to be uncomfortable. And if you at least come into the practice process with a friend or a family member, you give them some questions, hey, ask me on these questions. At least force yourself to test your knowledge. Go to meetups. Mentorship Saturdays at Metaltoad at 10 a.m. Is a great aspect as well.
Thanks.
All right, you're welcome. Thanks. All right, we're almost done here. Putting all your emotional energy into one job. It is very easy to find a job, that dream job. Oh, if I just get a job here. But keep it realistic expectations of any given job. If you put all your emotional energy into that job and then you don't get it, it saps your energy. You put all the emotional time and energy into that opportunity, and then you're like, ugh. And then you're not focusing on other things. Because a lot of times what happens is, in this scenario, people stop applying for other jobs. They stop coding. They really, I'm doing everything I can to get this one job. And they stop, putting other things into the fire to keep the fire burning. So until you actually are hired, you should be applying at other jobs. Even if you're into this third or fourth interview of a company, you should be applying at other positions, because you don't know if you get to that top level or fourth interview and you're the top two, but you don't get selected. And then you spend 3 or 4 weeks doing that process and you haven't applied for other jobs, then you've lost 3 or 4 weeks. So keep the process going. Do not put all your emotional eggs into one basket. make sure that you diversify and keep moving forward. Hopefully you get the job, and I'll send you positive advice if you get that one job that you want. But you want to keep realistic expectations. All right, don't prepare for the interview. This is tough. Make sure you look up the interviewer on LinkedIn. Generally, at companies, if they're nice, they'll send you who you're going to be interviewing with. Learn more about them. Kind of understand what they're what they've done. Hopefully, they have a LinkedIn profile. Check out their GitHub because sometimes you'll get the people you're interviewing will be developers. See what they've coded on GitHub. They may or may not have it. Understand the position. In a moment. Good. Research the company. Once you have an interview, remember I said spend a few minutes researching the company for the cover letter. Once you have an interview, you should be researching that company extensively, at least an hour and a half, looking at their mission statement, their product, any demos you can look at, understanding who their CEO is and their culture. Take the time, write down notes. Actually, you should have a quick cheat sheet about the company that you just type up real quickly, that you're able to understand the company and make sure that you're there and helping them out. Also, understand the position and make sure you have questions ready to go. Prepare for that. Jared, you got a question?
Yeah, so if, let's say you get you do a phone interview or whatever, and they invite you back for an in-person interview, is it normal to ask who you'll be interviewing with if they don't?
Oh yeah, generally it'll be an email from hey,
specific names.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they call you and say, do you want to come in for a phone interview, and you can.
Yeah, I would ask. I would say, hey, who am I going to be interviewing with? I just want to get prepared. Most companies, those ones that I've interviewed for, they said, hey, you're going to be interviewing with so person. And in fact, one company encouraged me to go look up their people on LinkedIn profile, because they wanted me to be prepared. They want you to succeed, and they want talent. And so they don't want to have you come in for the interview and then just kind of nah. They want somebody that's engaged and interested in the company. So the more you can learn about your prospective interviewer, obviously don't spend 5 hours trying to research who the person is. If you can't find it, you can't find it. But you can then learn more about the company. Trying to find a balanced approach to all these different things and put enough energy into a little bit of each thing helps increases your chances in many different aspects. But yes, I recommend trying to get asked for it. This is a repeat. Basically avoid practicing interviews. Practice with friends, test your knowledge, practice whiteboarding. Whiteboarding is not easy if you haven't written on a whiteboard. So if you have a chance to practice it, don't block the board. Focus in on things that allow you to actually help talk about it. And when you actually demonstrate on the whiteboard, talk through your logic. And that's where practice comes into play. You have to practice. Because a lot of times you want to try and solve the problem, and then you're not walking through your logic. And they're more interested in not you solving the problem. They want you to solve the problem, but they're more interested in how you go about solving problems. There are times when they may give you problems that aren't solvable, and they want to know how you kind of walk through that process. Because there are times when we hit roadblocks, even in the companies where they say, okay, we're going to try and solve this problem, and they realize, oh, we have to just kind of abandon that and do something totally different. Many times when I worked at my other companies, we'd have a project and they'd say, nope, not happening. And we just have to move on to another opportunity in a different way. Same thing in technology. There's some times where you've got a challenge that you're just going to either have to duct tape it or find a different opportunity. So, all right. After the interview, avoid following up with the company. Don't send a follow-up email thanking them. Don't send a thank you card. Avoid calling back to follow up. Oftentimes, one of the last questions you should ask during your interview is, when should I expect to, what are the next steps? And that allows you to know when to expect the next process. So if they say, yeah, we got a couple more interviews and we'll be making a decision around a week from now, you could follow up in a week from then to say, hey, I just want to see how things are going. You should send a follow-up email right away. Say, hey, thank you for the opportunity to interview. I really appreciate the chance to talk more about the company and to share my value and how I can add values. It's not an opportunity for you to relitigate something if you want to try and resell yourself. You're just thanking them for the time and the process. And then you should have thank you cards ready to go in your car, and then send a thank you card to each person that you're going to do it. Because what that shows is that number one, you're prepared, and number two, you're just thanking them for their time. Again, you're not relitigating anything that you want to try and say, here's why you should hire me. You're just saying in a short little note, and I'll get small thank you cards, really small. Hey, I really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about the company and meet you. And if you interview with 2 or 3 people, make sure every card's unique because they'll compare. And if you don't want to have a template like, I really like you guys, and then it's the same one over and over again, it just shows lack of creativity. So
Send those through the mail, right? Not
yeah,
just-
yeah.
Sure.
Email and send them. Actually, I literally when I was interviewing, I would have my thank you cards ready to go. I wouldn't have a name filled in because you may not know, but I would have a notepad and I'd be during the interview I'd be like notating who I'm interviewing with, and then I would actually send an individual card for each person on that team, uniquely. For example, in one company I interviewed, one of the ladies I interviewed was during Google Hangouts, and she was in the middle of moving, so she was actually literally in her parents' side yard in a trailer because she and her family were in the middle of moving. They were having a house built, and I basically said, "Hey, wish you the best on your move." So some sort of tidbit that personalizes that interaction, so that they say, "Yeah, that person was actually listening and cognitive and engaged." Yes.
Are you suggesting these cards be sent to the company?
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you don't know where they're, yeah, actual paper. This thing they invented 2,000 years ago. Yeah, you get this paper thing and you get an envelope. You put it in there and you put a stamp on it.
Don't.
Don't. Yeah. I'm not saying stalk them. What I'm saying is you should. And quite frankly, if you know the address of where you're working, like for example, I had people that I was interviewing that were remote. I just sent it to the corporate head office, attention to the name of the person, and they forwarded it on. I've had many people saying, "Hey, thank you for the thank you card." They mentioned me back on LinkedIn, and they said, "I appreciate the thank you card." And I didn't know their address, but the company forwards that on as is. So, all right, those are some high heavy hitters on what you can do to not get a tech job, and some ways to get a tech job. Any additional questions? Yes.
Place to look for job.
There's LinkedIn's one, Indeed, Dice. There's lots of places to look. What's that?
Glassdoor.
Glassdoor's another one. I would just recommend also networking too. Networks are big, 80% of the jobs that are out there are got through networking in some type or another. It just if they can have a human face to, because keep in mind, Joe Blow out there, Joe the plumber out there could be sitting there coding on Treehouse and say, "Oh, I'm going to be a good coder," and they can set a resume in. They don't know your skill sets. They don't know what your capacities are, so they get a lot of people interviewing. And people that don't even know how to code could apply for jobs. And so the more networking you have, the better chance they have of getting to meet you and realizing what you can do. Yes? Did I answer your question?
Well, I had a question. If you see a company that you like that posts like a different job than one you've already applied for, how often should you keep sending a resume into them?
I would say that persistence is important. If you really like the company and you really want to work for them, I would apply for each position that you think you're competent at. I would continue to do it, and obviously, if you keep looking, so if you're consistently looking for a job and you're applying at other opportunities, you're eventually going to hopefully get an opportunity, and so that maybe that company never pans out. But I would, if you're still interested in that company, I would keep applying. I wouldn't stop until, they're probably going to tell you to stop, but that's why I wouldn't spend more than 15 minutes on an application. But keep upgrading your skill sets, keep adding to your GitHub. They eventually might notice you. If you have a chance to go to any network opportunities at the company, like maybe they have hosting a meetup of any type, I would go and then introduce yourself. So, but the worst case scenario is that they don't call you. But again, that's why you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. You're applying other positions, but you can keep applying for that company if you really want to work there. Keep applying for it, and then if you get another opportunity somewhere else, you go work somewhere else. And you can still keep your eye open for that company and then say, you know what, I still want to work for that company. And if you're working and you're applying for that company, they'll probably take notice. Hey, they keep applying, they really like you, and they're currently working at this other company. Let's check them out. So, yes?
What is your opinion on tailoring your resume to the application and then follow-up? If you're applying to several positions within the same company, would you tailor your resume for each of those positions?
As a junior developer, I probably wouldn't. As you get more advanced, I probably would. Just because of the volume of resumes you're going to put out. Again, every hour you spend, every amount of time you spend on the application, somebody looks at your resume, gone. You could literally be ditched in 2 seconds, if not less. And so you have to say, do I want to spend an hour and a half on each company? So I would get a nice, good, well-formed resume, get it ready to go, and send it out, and then tweak your cover letter, and get the cover letter to be a little bit tweaked. Otherwise, if you spend so much time on each one, I mean, if you really want for a company and this is one you want to put a little more energy into, go for it, tweak it. But I would say the average one, no. Keep it a nice, just get a good, clean one going. Yes?
Some companies first HR scans your resume and they see if all position requirements match your resume. So you still want to tailor your resume so it matches, because HR just throw away your resume.
Right. You can also.
Nobody looks at it.
Right. But you should. But your resume should already have all the skill sets that they would already link in. So if you see that they have and she's right, you have a certain amount of skill sets and you're applying for a job, make sure that HTML and CSS and JavaScript are listed on your resume, so that when it scans it, they can actually catch it.
They don't understand if you say like you know JavaScript. They don't know like that it implies you know HTML and CSS.
Yes, exactly. yeah. You make sure if you have a well-formed resume.
Because HR scans you.
Yeah.
Resume first.
Yeah. If you have a well-formed resume, it'll help.
But if you are junior and sends like a resume with everything you know and like too much stuff in your resume, they also can throw it away because like you can't know so much stuff. But if you tell like for each position, different skills, it looks more nice. Yeah,
you can get your resume built out so that you can quickly add and remove skill sets to make it tweaked out. But I would keep the core part of it, your job experience and previous things there, get all that built out and squared away, and then have the skill sets listed on there, and then tweak as needed. But then again, your GitHub's also going to be, there are companies that will still look at the resume too, and they are big companies that will, like you said, will pass through the system. Any other questions? Yes.
GitHub. I'm 20 years in the business, but I used to do mainframes.
Right.
I've never had an employer ask me about a GitHub account. Is that something?
Currently, yeah, because it's brand new. It's within the last 5-6 years.
How many companies actually look at that as a percentage?
A lot, most of them nowadays. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's become the de facto. You can also, also you can use Gitbucket or some other one, but you need some sort of place where you're versioning, because it shows how you handle version control. I mean, right there, you need to have a skill set on version control, and if you use GitHub, chances are it's going to show. So it's far more than you realize. Really? There may be some companies left that are like, oh, we'll just look at the resume and kind of go from there. But a lot of them are going to send their tech. Hey, hiring manager, I'm the hiring manager. I'm going to send my 2 tech people to go look at your GitHub. And they're going to assess it out and see what they think of your GitHub.
It's good to know.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have to, but keep in mind with GitHub, GitHub is one of those things that you have to work on a regular basis. If you are not in there and dabbling in your GitHub on a regular basis and uploading new code, it's going to suck. If you're leaving it blank, then you have to be a developer to get hired as a developer. And they want to see your code. They want to see how you write up your README files. They want to see what you're doing. Are you contributing? Because you can actually go on GitHub and fork over something else and contribute some code. Browse, read code, star things. They're going to look at your activity. I mean, if you go on there at GitHub and there's no stars, no one's following you, you're not following anybody else, and there's no activity. Are they a developer? Are they not? I don't know. And so obviously, if you're going to link to they're going to expect a GitHub address on your resume if you're applying for software development. And if they don't see one, that's going to be a red flag. So you can send out all the resumes in the world, but if your GitHub's not up to date and has a good collection of stuff for them to review, they're just not going to know how to address your skill set. Plus, when they look at your GitHub and you have all these cool pieces of coding, they have something to ask you about. Oh, tell me about this project you worked on. Why did you handle it this way? What have you thought about doing this? And so it allows for there to be an open discussion and an ongoing. Plus, if you really do good on your GitHub, we had one student who went into a technical interview and said, "I looked at your GitHub, it was great. Let's learn more about you." And they wanted to get to know him as a person, as opposed to because they figured he could code. He'd already come recommended, again, networking, and they already looked at his GitHub and they're like, "Yep, this person knows how to code. We're good." You know, and he's still coding today. He's still coding right now. Been there for a year now. So, any other questions? They're all free. Yes, Jared.
You said that 80% of jobs come from networking, and a lot of jobs aren't posted and whatnot. What's your suggestion for going from you go to a meetup, you talk to people, to asking them for opportunities?
I wouldn't ask for opportunities ever. What I would do is just make yourself available. When you go to a meetup is a place to share some sort of common interest. So you go to a data science meetup, or you go to a Python meetup, or you go to this is one our school is a kind of exception. We are trying to help people find jobs, but you want to go there and have an interest in the meetup. So if you're really interested, you don't go to a meetup just to go to meetup. You're going there to share some sort of interest. You want to hear a Future Tech Talk, a New Relic. You want to go to Mentorship Saturday to practice and develop your code. You want to go to a TAO meetup, that to learn more about something. And so when you go there, you're going there to share some sort of shared passion. Now, during your conversations, you can talk about they can say, hey, you can introduce yourself. I'm Jared, da da da. And they ask, what do you do? Oh, I'm currently looking for a job. Oh, cool, yeah, And that's one way for them to be aware. So you have to you bring it up, but you don't go there and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. And that's why oftentimes if you take your business card, you should have some sort of card where you can hand out, hey, it was great meeting you and great learning more about you. Here's my LinkedIn profile. Let's connect. And then maybe they'll give you theirs, or they'll give you their link. Yes?
Also, you can get their business card, especially HR. And sometimes HR posts a new position on LinkedIn first because it doesn't cost them money.
Yep.
So, and you can follow them and get, for example, Nike.
Yep.
They post on LinkedIn first.
You can get job alerts too, and that's something I mentioned. A lot of them will actually give you job alerts. LinkedIn will allow you to choose Simple Finance or Marketo or any company, and then you start getting emails when those positions with those companies start coming up. So you get emails right away saying, hey, a new opportunity at Marketo or Salesforce or wherever. So you don't have to sit there and watch with a bated breath on LinkedIn for a job to be posted. You can go to the companies you're interested in working at and have them send you links. It's a lot of emails to sift through, but you can at least scan, junior developer or this position.
If you've been in a completely unrelated field, is LinkedIn still worth it?
Yeah, because basically they want to know what you've been doing. Otherwise, where have you been for the last 6 years? What have you done? You should list out your stuff. And if you have a gap in history or work history, or if you start a gap, you should stay actively engaged in some way, whether it be volunteering or doing school or some sort of training that allows you to better yourself. Be engaged, volunteer on coding projects. The main thing about gaps is they want to know, were you sitting on the couch eating bonbons and feeling sorry for yourself, or were you actually actively engaged in improving your life in some meaningful way? Are you coding? Are you building something out? That gap is only a detriment if you're doing absolutely nothing and you can't talk about anything. Yeah, I just sat around and I didn't know what to do. So that's a detriment. But if you're actively coding and building stuff out, they'll see it on your GitHub. And if you're actively volunteering, and you don't have to volunteer in coding, you can just volunteer at a soup kitchen or volunteer on a project. When I was unemployed a few years ago, I actually went and worked at my running club and helped them build out a website, and I was a project manager for that whole process. And so I put that on my resume. During that time, I was actively involved with my running club as a volunteer project manager, and I helped them actually upgrade and build everything with their Google for Work, and basically Google for Nonprofit. Got that all set up, all the emails, all the administrations, all the processes, and I put hundreds of hours of work into that. But I wanted to stay actively engaged while I was still looking for opportunities. So you will face times when you'll have lulls in the career, but it's what you're doing with that time in between that they're going to ask about. And that's what's most important. How do you fill your time? That's why if you want to be a developer, you got to act like a developer. They're going to look at your GitHub. Were you coding? Or were you just sitting on your couch, hiding under these blankets, like, I want to find a job. So you don't want to do that. Any other questions? All right, well, thanks for coming. If you could do a survey, it'd be greatly appreciated. And have some more pizza. They're available for you. Pizza, yes.